As hard as it is to accept, our world has been no stranger to the people living on the other side of the law. Some people have committed crimes more extreme than others. Today we will be sharing the most infamous mugshots of all time, and buckle up because we have a list for you. But before we get into it, let's first shed light on what a mugshot really is. It is a photograph of a person's face made for official purposes, notably police reports, which is usually taken after a suspect is arrested or detained. Now let's get straight to it. The first on the list is Jeffrey Dahmer. If we're talking about infamous mugshots, who better to start off the list with than Jeffrey Dahmer? Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was an American serial killer. His nicknames included the Milwaukee Monster and the Milwaukee Cannibal. Born and raised in Ohio, Wisconsin, he was like any normal child. Dahmer committed his first murder on June 18, 1978, just 3 weeks after graduating from college. The victim's name was Stephen Mark Hicks, and it was the first of many murders that would follow. Dahmer was later convicted on charges of first-degree murder, child molestation, indecent exposure, disorderly conduct, and public intoxication. He was arrested on July 22, 1991, and was convicted on 15 terms of life imprisonment on February 17, 1992. A 16th term was later added for a homicide committed in 1978. When Dahmer's apartment was searched, remains of his former victims were found in his freezers, such as organs like the heart and bones. Dahmer was killed by a fellow inmate, Christopher Carver, at the age of 34 on November 28, 1994. Carver gave a statement later on regarding why he killed Dahmer, and the reason was due to his insensitive humor, stating that Dahmer would make limbs out of food and use ketchup to portray blood. Gruesome and nerve-wracking, but that's not it. The list is just getting started, and while we're on the topic of serial killers, here is the next one on our list. Theodore Robert Bundy, also known as Ted Bundy, was an American serial killer, possibly much more infamous than Jeffrey Dahmer due to the magnitude of his heinous crimes. Like Dahmer, Ted Bundy was also a serial killer, but his crimes were much greater in magnitude. Bundy, unlike most serial killers, was a man of the people. He was a political campaigner and a successful psychologist. His crimes included kidnapping, rape, and murder. On February 4, 1974, Linda Ann Healy became the first of Bundy's victims. She was a student of the University of Washington and was one of the 20 confirmed victims of Ted Bundy. After a decade of remaining silent, Bundy finally confessed to the murders of 30 victims, notably women, but the authorities still suspect upwards of 36 victims across 7 states. Bundy was convicted for his crimes on July 24, 1979, for the murder of 2 college students. In the upcoming year, he was again sentenced to death, this time for the rape and murder of a 12-year-old girl. Bundy was executed at the age of 42 on January 24, 1989, by an electric chair. A documentary was made about him, is available on Netflix. Enough of serial killers. Let's talk about drug traffickers. Pablo Escobar. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria was a Colombian drug lord who was the founder and only leader of the Medellin cartel. Undoubtedly one of the most famous men in the world, but unfortunately for all the wrong reasons. Killings, trafficking, money laundering, extortion, terrorism, and whatnot. You say the crime and Pablo were involved in it. Pablo was born in Riongro, Colombia, on December 1, 1949. Escobar's cartel dealt only in cocaine, focusing mainly on production, transport, and sale. It is said that he was solely responsible for over 80% of the cocaine sold around the world and was raking in hundreds of millions a month. Pablo is known to be one of the most dangerous and powerful drug lords of all time. Because of this, his grip over the global drug market played a major role in his power. Escobar single-handedly caused the cocaine epidemic in the United States in the 1980s. Pablo Escobar was arrested in 1991. He surrendered to the Colombian authorities and was sentenced to 5 years while passing a law against extradition on the same day. He was later imprisoned in his own constructed prison, where he continued to live a lavish lifestyle. Escobar would still control the cartel through prison. However, on December 2, 1993, just a day after his birthday, Pablo died. He was shot during a shootout between the Colombian authorities and D. There are speculations about Pablo shooting himself, but that's a debate for another day. 4. El Chapo. Joaquin Archivaldo Guzman Loera, famously known as El Chapo, was also a Mexican drug kingpin and a former leader within the Sinaloa cartel and international crime syndicate. Unlike Pablo Escobar, El Chapo, he dealt with several drugs such as marijuana, cocaine, meth, fentanyl, and heroin. El Chapo's riches were upwards of $12.6 billion. He was first arrested in Guatemala in 1993 during a massive manhunt. He was later deported to Mexico to serve 20 years in prison for murder and drug trafficking. He escaped shortly after in 2001 by bribing prison officials and escaping through the laundry cart. He was arrested nearly 13 years later in February of 2014 when the Mexican Navy raided his seaside hotel where he had been visiting his family. He remained in prison for over a year but then escaped again through a mile-long tunnel under his maximum security prison cell in 2015. Still, his freedom did not last long, as nearly 6 months after his escape, he was caught a third time in January 2016. He remains in prison to this day, where he is supposed to serve life imprisonment of 30+ years, and his assets were seized. 5. Bill Cosby. William Henry Cosby Jr. is an American stand-up comedian, actor, and author. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1984, and his comedy records won him 8 Grammys throughout his career. Born in Philadelphia on July 12, 1937, Cosby started his career as a stand-up comic at the Hungry Club in San Francisco in the 1960s. Cosby played a major role in developing a more positive portrayal of blacks on television. Cosby's reputation, however, was tarnished due to allegations against him as a sex offender. The earliest allegation dates back to 2004, when Andrea Constand, director of operations for Temple University's women's basketball team, allegedly met with Cosby at his house after a night out with friends, where she was later drugged and molested. He was later found guilty in court on all accounts and paid $3.38 million in a settlement. In total, Cosby has been charged with 60 accounts of rape, drug-facilitated sexual assault, sexual battery, or other sexual misconduct. There have also been allegations regarding child sexual abuse where both the victims were 15 years old. Cosby was finally convicted of aggravated indecent assault in 2018, which would serve him 3-10 years in jail. But he was released on June 30, 2021. 6. Mike Tyson. Michael Gerard Tyson is a former American boxer who participated in the sport from 1985 to 2005. He was often called Iron Mike or Kid Dynamite in his early days, but was later named the most dangerous man on the planet. Tyson, born on June 30, 1966, in New York, was often caught committing petty crimes and fighting those who ridiculed his high-pitched voice and lisp. By the age of 13, he had been arrested 38 times. 7. Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was an American Baptist minister and activist who became one of, if not the most visible spokesman and leader in the civil rights movement for people of color as they were referred to in the past, from 1955 to his untimely demise in 1968. Born on January 10, 1957, Martin, like his father, was a civil rights activist for black people in the United States. He won a Nobel Peace Prize on October 14, 1964 for combating racial inequality by nonviolent resistance. Martin was arrested 29 times for acts of civil disobedience and other nonsense charges, such as driving 5 miles above the speed limit. Although he was a highly beloved figure, he did not live a very long life as he was assassinated at the young age of 39 on April 4, 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. Martin Luther King is regarded highly in American history as someone who fought against the system for the black people. His I Have a Dream speech is among the most famous speeches ever delivered today. This is all for today's video. Which mugshot do you think is the most infamous on the list? If you have more to add to the list, do share with us in the comments. Oh, and if you like the video, please hit the like button and do not forget to subscribe to the channel so we can keep bringing you amazing content. Until next time, take care.